representing heaven. How did those, I'm sure they were very interesting dialogues, or, I mean, going through multiple scripts. Can you kind of elaborate on, like, what was expected? You know, like when Renee came into the picture, she was wearing her cancer scarf on her head, and I was kind of thinking, okay, well, why is she wearing it there, you know, versus, and her mom is feeling, it looks great, kind of thing, like, so could you kind of go through some of those iterations of what heaven was, or the conversations?
That decision was actually made like days before we shot it, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to make her beautiful after her death before she enters the gates, or if I still wanted her to be weak, sorry, Melissa, or if I still wanted her to be weak and sickly. And I think part of it was like the transition between earth to heaven is she's no longer feeling sick anymore. She's feeling 10 times better, and she is already starting to shed those things. And to me, it was kind of like God has healed her body on her way to heaven, but then she gets to actually like feel that on the outside when she enters those gates, and represent what she feels on the inside on her outward as well.
So that makes sense. It's you come as you are, and you're in transition to heaven. Okay, thank you.
And the idea of a family member meeting you on the other side, there's been a lot of hospice nurse discussions about people in their final days, and if they have the ability to talk, they often will say the names of family members that have left this world already. So that's kind of where that idea came from. Not so much a group of people, but a particular person that they were particularly close with, holding their hand and taking them to. And I decided not to show judgment because that's not my place. That's God's place, and I felt like if I put it in a movie, I would be taking God's place. So I chose very specifically not to put judgment in there, but I wanted to put what he said because I did not want to glorify suicide. Even accidental suicide.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because in my movie we actually talked about the same thing, about people at end of life kind of having 1 foot in heaven, 1 foot on earth, so interesting. Sort of the same thing. And I'd heard that from hospice nurses as well. As a psychologist, I think that you dealt with this very sensitively. And I thought that, you know, it's a really tough subject to do well, and you did it.
Thank you. David has a question. Here it comes.
Samantha, you did a great job. You really did. And I'll tell you why I think you did a great job. You're dealing with something, man, you're in dangerous territory, what you're dealing with. It's like stepping on a time bomb, right? Because everyone has so many opinions, and judgments, and whatever. But first of all, I commend you for taking the risk. That's number one. Number two is you succeeded. I did cry.
Guys, I made David cry.
And it wasn't because I couldn't hear the dialogue either. So in the writing, I'll start with the writing, you were able to put these scenes together to where it kept me interested, meaning, you know, and the way you did it, it was very difficult because you just went one after another. There was really no transition other than, you know, your expose. But number two is the actors really did a great job, okay? If you would have had weak actors, it would have just been a disaster. I would have known the story, I wouldn't have felt it. You know, you did a great job.
I didn't want to do this.
Huh?
She didn't want to do this at first.
Yeah.
She is the fighter, strong person, and she's like, I have to be weak and feeble. I'm like, it'll be great for your reel.
Yeah, I actually like you better with that thing on your head. Just kidding. So, yeah, and the other thing, I didn't know where it was going. You know, I mean, I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to kill everybody. Nobody left on earth. Thank goodness the mother and the baby didn't go too. I was like, I couldn't take much more of this.
Yeah, interesting thing is I thought about that.
Yeah, and then you got into the last thing I'll just mention. You got into something that you just so risky, but it worked in the piece that you did, was heaven. It's like, you know, what do you do with heaven? You know, it's like, and you didn't complicate it. You just made it very simple, very whatever, you know. And there were certain things, the guy, the dad, the young dad heard the voice of his wife and he encouraged her, you know, from heaven, right? And then he stopped before he went through this, quote, pearly gate, whatever you want to call it. And he did acknowledge that, hey, I don't deserve to go in there. So you brought that into the forefront, which I think was very important.
That dialogue in that scene, I was so particular about.
Right, exactly. So you did the right stuff, and you didn't say too much. That's the other thing. If you would have talked too much, and they would have said, it would have also gone over the edge. But it was just the right, I felt like the right amount. And my only question to you is, and I know you've told me, but I'd like to hear it again in 10 seconds or less, or 15. What is it that you're trying to tell people in this piece?
I'm trying to inspire hope for our families and friends that we have lost previously, and I'm trying to inspire people to ask questions that may be non-believers about what life will look like after we do die.
That's really good. Do you want to know? I'll tell you what I got out of it. I don't know if you all can relate to this. Is after I saw this, I'm going, I need to go hug my wife. I need to be thankful for being here on this planet right now for my life. So I know what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying because you wrote it. But I'm telling you, for me, I don't know if you all can relate to this. It made me go, I need to thank God I'm here right now. So what it does is it brings us into reality for the moment, to appreciate the moment. Good job.
Scott?
Yeah, it did the same thing for me. It made me not want to hug your wife, not my wife, but I wanted to mention, I like the concept where we're able to see the other side. I think because we don't often, we think about this way instead of that way, and so it's great that you've done that. You know the story of Lazarus. Jesus is going to go heal him. He weeps for Lazarus. He's going to go raise him from the dead. Well, why would Jesus weep for someone that he knows he's just going to go raise from the dead? Maybe it wasn't he was weeping because he died. Maybe Jesus was weeping because he knew he was going to bring him back from that to this world, because that's so much greater. And but we're so focused on this world, and it's nice that this film helped us focus on that world.
I completely agree when people ask my feelings about death, because I have been surrounded by it. 2017 and 2024 have been really, really rough years when it comes to death in my family. And I cry. I'm angry sometimes. I go through a slew of emotions, and I am a believer. And, when people ask you why, you can't explicitly answer that question, but my thought is, I'm selfishly crying because I'm going to miss them. And there's not going to be any future memories of them on this earth with me again. But imagine what they're doing right now. And they're having that time of their eternal life, and I'm down here sad. But, eventually, hopefully, I'm planning to be, maybe when I'm 80, in heaven as well. And I'd be like, why did I cry? This place is awesome. So that's kind of my feeling around death. And I'm still sad. I just lost my grandmother and my cousin this year, and a slew of other people within the church. And I'm still crying, but I'm trying to remind myself, they're having the time of their eternal lives right now. I'm gonna be sad, but they're having a good time.
I did think you were gonna have the child being born premature, and then the dad was gonna receive the child.
Ooh, interesting.
That would have been deep though. So
very interesting.
I thought that's what you're setting up to. So, but it might have been too much. Sorry, I don't know.
I did throw around the idea of Maisie essentially going in childbirth, or going and coming back, because I wanted to give her the opportunity to yell and scream at him in heaven and say, what were you thinking? But due to slight time constraints as well as the corniness kind of in it, I killed someone and I brought them back, hurrah. But I decided not to do that. So I'm glad I made that choice.
Remind me not to be a character.
Yeah, you're not coming back.
I'm very dramatic, as you can tell.
No.
No, very, very dramatic.
Samantha, I thought your actors were incredible, and I want to compliment you and then ask a question. I want to compliment you on the editing and the cinematography. I know you spoke of your budget to me, and on that budget, that was insane.
My budget was $4,000, and all of my top cast was paid, but the featured extras, the extras, and the crew was not. But I did reimburse travel. I gave them gas money, and I gave them a place to sleep if they were more than an hour away, because I'm a great host. And I fed them 2 or 3 meals a day. So they had breakfast, they had lunch, and then whatever was left over from lunch, they ate or took back to the Airbnb. So I take care of my people, and the goal is for features, no one works for free.
So can I ask my question?
Go for it, Becky.
Can you explain what it was like working with a real live infant?
My first assistant director was terrified because he didn't have children, doesn't have children, doesn't want to have children, and that is perfectly okay. So he was like, there's a real baby on set. There's a real baby on set. Everyone put your masks up, put your gloves on, don't touch it, stay far, far away from the baby. And I'm just like, come here, little cutie, because I have children. And I love babies. And this baby was a friend of mine's baby, so I wasn't too scared of it for myself. Becca felt comfortable, Hannah felt comfortable. So the only people that were allowed to touch the baby were myself, because I was in there, and then the actors and the dad that was there. So no one was allowed to touch the baby. We put masks up, and we filmed this spring, but we still decided to mask because we wanted the family to feel safe, letting us have their baby on a film. And then the toddler that she was holding during the cooking scene is my son, and he was not quite 2 at the time. I essentially told her, okay, I'm gonna bring my son in, I'm gonna have him on your hip, I want you to do the scene just like you have been doing, and if he starts crying, keep going. Because it was my kid, and I wasn't afraid of my kid to cry, because I would just love him once we said cut. So we did 2 takes with him, because he was so chill, he just looking around. He's like the happiest baby boy, so. People were scared, but I wasn't. I felt pretty comfortable with having a baby on set.
I'm a little curious about just your lighting and how you creating this heaven scene. I'm wondering if you've done that in the studio with you had kind of like an infinity background or whatever. Talk to me a little bit about the lighting of that.
That was the plan, but due to budget constraints, did not happen. The nearest infinity studio that I was aware of was 3 hours away from where we shot. So what I did was, I actually have a 16 by 20 she shed in the back of my house that I have painted white. And what I did was I just put white all over the floor, and I have my visual effects artist just edit out the seams, because that was the plan, was an infinity studio, but can't afford it. So we had to work with that, and my visual effects artist, Tyler Osaka, was just amazing in getting out all the seams, making the floor flawless. We tried to lock off every single shot in there except for the hug between Christian and Renee, simply to make visual effects a lot easier. And then those like gold specks were also visual effects. The gates, however, were real, very heavy, and they were made by Fleming Fabrication. They were about maybe this tall, and maybe 4 to 5 feet wide, but man, were they heavy. And we ended up donating those too.
So you're saying you edited out the seams and stuff in post?
Yes.
Okay,
So
so
like,
we had seen.
we had the wall and we had the floor, and we just made it seamless. I did put up like that snowy white felt along the walls, even though they were white, hoping to give it like a cotton candy type of texture, but it didn't work. And when we saw it on the camera, I looked over at Tyler, who was also the first AC, and I'm like, can you edit out those seams? And he's like, yup, I got you. And I'm like, you're the best. So yes, we edited out the scenes between each film.
Good, and I also kind of wondered about your makeup, because I thought that the scene with the young man, you have him kind of dramatically raise his head, and his eyes look so grief-stricken, and I thought, ooh, whoever her makeup was, she had a good makeup person, I thought.
That was my favorite shot. One of my favorite shots. My head makeup person actually decided that she was not a good fit for this film the afternoon before we filmed Heaven. So right before she bailed, it is what it is, but my assistant makeup artist, who is 17 years old, she turns 18 this month, stepped up and went out and got a bunch of other skin colors that she didn't have, and she did it all at 17, just stepped up and she was ready to go. His tears were real in his eyes, and he could just turn it on like that, and so could Becca, but her tears were very, very real. So during her breakdown scene, we locked her in a bathroom, and we lit it. I kind of acted out her blocking points, and we did rogue camera, like handheld, and I said, once you get into your scene, you're amazing, just start acting. I'm not gonna action you, we are already going to be rolling by the time you walk out of that bathroom. And she is in there by herself, doing her thing, and she comes out already just bawling. So she was really amazing to work with. And Melissa, I was really working on her, getting her into those emotions, because this is different from what you've done. This is very dramatic, this is very feeble, and you were very raw. And can I tell the story, Melissa?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the story with Melissa, she was acting so good, and I could see the tears in her eyes, the shake in her voice. The camera was on her younger son, and then when we went to get her shot, she wasn't there. And I was like, okay, Melissa, here, let me pull you aside. What were you thinking about when the camera was on Christian? And she told me, I won't get into that part, but she told me what was going on in her mind, and I could see her get back into that mindset. I'm like, okay, we're gonna roll it now. And I had her back in her seat, and then I had her in that motion, and you did have some tear on that eye too. It looked really good. So it's interesting, every actor likes to be directed differently. Becca just liked to kind of be on her own and get in. Christian, you could tell him exactly what you wanted and he'd find it, and then Melissa, I'd have to look into her own personal life and her own emotions and get them out of her. So each person directed was different, so I had my work cut out for me, but they all did an amazing job, and I couldn't have asked for a better cast.